This is the garden question and answer video that I do every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. Stick around because we've got 26 questions this week. Also, happy Mother's Day to everyone. The weekly garden planner is $50 off for the entire month of May. It's a week by week garden plan for when to prune things, when to fertilize things, when and what to do in the garden, how to maintain your garden throughout the 52-week calendar. It's over on the website, and there's a $50 discount code that's listed below in the description of this video if you want to take advantage of that. A few details about the open garden before I jump into the 26 questions from this week. Our address is 709 Harris Street in Raleigh, and our street is a dead end, and so some of the questions about this, just answering some of the questions people have about coming. Of course, the tickets are over on the website, and it's June 20th, the evening of June 20th. You pick either the evening of June 20th, the morning of the 21st, or the afternoon of the 21st. That's the three different spots for tickets on the again that are on the website. Our road is a dead end road, and people were great last year about this. Because Harris is a dead end and it only has a few parking places available, we're trying to get people not to come down this road and just to walk down. So there's parking along any road in my neighborhood in any direction, and there's a church over on Brooks Avenue that you can see on a map that's right next to, very close to the house. And then you can walk over here to it. The reason we want to leave these 2 or 3 parking places open along Harris is if anybody with disabilities or if you need to park on Harris, do it. That's my point. Let's save those for somebody who can't walk as far. Okay, and people were great about that last year. Your email receipt for your ticket is your ticket. Okay, I'm not going to be sending out any kind of ticket in the mail or anything like that. So just show us the email and you're good to go. So I think that's it. Again, the address is 709 Harris Street. And so we look forward to seeing everybody then. And I think about 3/4 of the tickets are gone. They're weirdly, though, still tickets for all 3 time slots. I don't know how that has actually worked out. I figured that Saturday morning would be done first. Okay. Then I have a exciting piece of information. Any of you coming to see the garden on Friday evening or Saturday morning, I talked to Tony Avent yesterday, and Juniper Level Botanic Garden will be open on Friday morning for anyone who's coming to the garden here. So all you have to do is go over to Juniper Level Botanic Garden on Friday morning and just say you're with HortTube or Jim Putnam or whatever you want to say. And the staff there will know that you're welcome to come in and tour the garden over at Juniper Level Botanic Garden. And if you haven't seen it, it's a bucket list garden to go and see. There's 27,000 taxa or something like that in that garden. It's pretty wild. I think about 8 acres of the garden there are open to the public, or open, for events and that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm pretty excited that Tony was allowing any of you who are coming to this event to go there as well as part of it. So, okay. Let's jump into some gardening questions. So somebody said, why is it actually good for a garden to be diverse? A wide variety of species are nice to look at, but how is it actually good for their garden? Well, the number of species that I have in this garden are extending the flower time for sure, which is allowing pollinators and birds and other things to take advantage of a very long season of just not everything coming into flower and going out of flower. So let me go through a list of reasons. The more things you would have in the garden like this, the more opportunity you would have for beneficial insects to find a place to live in this garden on the thing that they like to live on, and hopefully eliminate some other pest that might be part of a problem. It also eliminates, if some sort of pest or disease problem comes along that attacks one particular plant out here, I'm hardly going to notice it with 300 and some different species in this garden, right? If I had only planted this garden with 10 different things and all of a sudden one of my row of 20 of something died tomorrow, obviously that would have a giant negative impact in this garden. So it's about not losing an entire group of plants because we've overplanted, a single thing. So disease and insect resistance. And then another thing that I think people may not think about is that some of these plants, because of maybe wherever they evolved or whatever, they may be really heavy users of a particular nutrient. So it might be a heavy boron feeder or calcium or magnesium or whatever it is. If you plant too many of the same thing in a garden, they're going to deplete potentially a single nutrient out of the soil. And so by having a more diverse garden, you're going to have some of the plants actually making nutrients available for other plants, but nothing in the garden actually depleting it of one particular thing. So there's that as well. It's one of the problems with row crop farming. Like if you grow sweet potatoes in a field, for multiple years, they start to strip certain nutrients from the soil. So that's why a crop rotation is good. Well, this is a version of crop rotation, right? Kind of a wild version of crop rotation. So there's some of the reasons why having a diverse, the more species, the better kind of a garden is beneficial. Let's see. Somebody asked, is that a cordyline? Yes, this is Charlie Boy cordyline. Got a bunch of questions about it last year because it was sticking up about that much of the top of it was sticking up in the video. And then there was a lot of questions about the Carolina Midnight Laura petalum. I'll probably have to turn that way in a couple minutes. So you'll see that in a couple minutes because the sun's going to start hitting things in the background back here and causing a problem in a few minutes. Let's see. Somebody has a 6-foot azalea hedge, probably with like Formosa azaleas and George Tabor azaleas. The husband cut them too hard, so now there's actual holes that you can see into them where they fill back out. Is there anything they can do to help it? No, time will take care of it. You can cut azaleas, especially older ones like 6-foot tall azaleas. You can cut them to the ground and they'll come back from it. No big deal ultimately. You might take advantage of being able to clean them out a bit inside. What I find when I've reset old azaleas is, despite azaleas being evergreen, they actually drop leaves pretty consistently during the season. And they're also, because they kind of colonize down in the plant a bit, they're good at collecting leaves. And they can cause themselves problems in the future. So if you've got an opportunity to get in there and clean some of that stuff out, you can do that too. So I had said that having rocks in the garden, will help with moisture. You can plant plants that like slightly moist feet near rocks, and they have an opportunity. When you flip over a rock, there's always moisture under there. It just seems like no matter how dry it is, you can flip a rock over and find at least a little bit of moisture up under them. This person was just asking if that would work for pea gravel too. I think it would work with almost anything you're covering the ground with, mulches, pea gravel, whatever. It just works especially well with large rocks that are sunk down in the ground just a little bit. This person said, with lots of ground covers planted, like at Ram's house, is there an issue with nutrients getting into the soil? So I guess like if you were fertilizing over the top of it, how's that fertilizer getting down to the ground? I think is this question. I don't know if they were asking about them depleting a nutrient or something in the ground. I think they were just talking about how the nutrients get down in the ground. When I fertilize, and I've shown this over the years, when I do my organic fertilizer, I go back, I take the broom, don't throw it out when the leaves are wet. It'll stick to the leaves. But as long as the leaves are drying, when I throw the fertilizer out, I just take a broom and I broom it off of everything so it goes down into the ground. So I'll just go across and basically shake the plants, so with a broom, gently. I'm not trying to break the plants apart, obviously, but that gets the fertilizer down to the ground, and then I water it in because it's stinky, and the dogs, love it. So, but no, there's not really an issue if you just do that. Just broom it in. So I had talked about not having grass under trees. There are some trees that are more likely to handle grass being grown right up to them than others, but red maples and river birches and a lot of the things that people use in their gardens, them and grass don't particularly play nice together. The grass is always thin and the roots end up on the top, and they just in general don't like being with one another. This person was asking if ground covers and perennials and annuals should be avoided too, to avoid root competition. So this isn't about root competition. This is actually just about, grass doesn't like to be in the shade, and grass isn't particularly good at mowed grass. And what we're talking about here is mowed grass. There's two different types of, you have grasslands, like in the Midwest was before we turned it all into corn and soybeans. The grasslands where the grasses get 5 and 6 feet tall. That needs to be, there's a deer over there. No, it's a dog. It's a very large dog. So in a grassland, you don't have erosion problems because the grasses get 6 feet tall and then they die back in the winter, and all that thatch and everything holds the soil in place. Mowed turf that we have in our gardens is very susceptible to erosion, and I don't think people know it's actually happening. But when you come, you mow something 35 times a year down to this height, it's not really holding the soil in as well as you think it is. And so where you think that these maples and everything have all these surface roots, some of it is actually you losing soil over time. A lot of that can be prevented by having plants and mulch under there rather than mowed turf. So you're losing soil that you don't know you're losing. I see a lot of places in this neighborhood where I can see basically gravel kind of in the lawn, and that basically, those larger rocks are sitting there where topsoil has been washing away, and the larger rocks are still sitting there. That's what you're actually seeing. It's like those rocks didn't just rain from the sky, they just got exposed from the topsoil washing out of the lawn, a thinner lawn over the years. And of course your lawn's going to be a little thin under that tree potentially. So no, I would definitely put annuals, ground covers, mulch, throw everything you got at it underneath that tree just to try to stabilize the soil underneath it, which is what all these plants are trying to do. They're in competition with one another, but they're also helping one another by preventing the topsoil and the nutrients that they all need from washing away. Okay. So somebody said they're confused about container fertilizer. I got all the containers here behind me. They just thought container culture is different. So synthetic fertilizer, you basically have to use synthetic fertilizer in these containers in order to have them grow, because there's less nutrients in the materials that you have in the container, and they lose it over time. So, they don't have the microbes in there and all those kinds of things. So you don't have a lot of what's going on in the soil that can support the plants in these containers. So yes, you're definitely going to need more fertilizer. You can use rock dust, and you can buy it on Amazon and other places. You can mix rock dust into your container mixes, and that will help somewhat with what we're talking about here. But so when I'm saying about I don't fertilize my containers very much, I'm not saying I never fertilize my containers. What I'm saying is I fertilize my containers based on observation. When I initially plant them, the compost does have some nutrients in it. It does have a lot of what the plants need. It does deplete over the course of the summer as these things root in and grow and use some of the nutrients that are in the containers. My point about fertilizing these hanging baskets and containers, your vegetable garden, annual borders in your garden, is to do it by observation. So out here in the front garden where we put fresh compost in, our annuals have already tripled in size, and we've cut them back once already. I suspect by the time you guys they're coming to the open gardener here June 20th, it'll be completely filled in, and I will not have fertilized by then in all likelihood, unless I observe that they're growing a little slower than I would like for them to grow, at which point I would fertilize them. And if you choose to use a synthetic fertilizer, that's fine. Or I can use flower tone or something, for flowering things or for containers. So that's up to you. What I'm saying is I never fertilize because it's Tuesday, and Tuesday's fertilizer day. That's not how I've ever fertilized. I fertilize the garden once a year with a organic fertilizer just to show how little I fertilize. And then the rest of the fertilizing that's done out here the rest of the year is observation based. So I haven't fertilized the vegetable garden in probably the 5 seasons I've had a vegetable garden over there. Again, it got organic fertilizer thrown across it in March or February when I fertilized everything, but that was it. I've added compost over there multiple times. The soil's broken up this deep. My vegetables are, I just put the tomatoes, I just started staking the tomatoes the other day. We'll have all the produce we want out of there just because we've worked on that soil for so long without having to push them any more than that. The containers at some point I will observe and probably have to fertilize them a couple times before the summer's over. But again, my point is it's about observation. Is the thing performing the way you want it to perform? Also, if I start throwing fertilizer at this Lamandra or this crepe myrtle or whatever here, it's May, okay? How much do I want to water this thing? I actually would like this thing to kind of grow. I'd like to, all the annuals that we put in here, and that video went up this week on the containers, I'd actually like to enjoy these until almost November. We have that luxury here in Raleigh. What's gonna happen if I start throwing fertilizer at it tomorrow? Everything in here is gonna be this big by middle of June, and I'm gonna be watering that container twice a day the rest of the time. So I kind of like that slow and steady thing. But that's kind of the point here. So it's not to confuse you. It's just to say, hey, sometimes just stand back and take a look at it and go, hey, the thing looks great. And put the fertilizer away for another week. So the internet says to clean up your landscape once 5 to 7 days with lows in the 50s. But what they're talking about is cutting back, raking up leaves, litter, cutting back native perennials and those kinds of things. We want to wait to clean the garden up until very late winter into spring, just a little bit, so that the things that may overwinter in your garden have an opportunity to come back out, for the spring and summer from the next year. A lot of these, where do your native bees go for the winter? Where do your, native, where are the butterflies, the caterpillars and the other things, where do they go in the winter? A lot of it's in this leaf litter, in your native perennials, in kind of the messy places in your garden is where a lot of the life lives, right? And they were just saying that, they have nights in the 40s coming. What should they do? Despite the fact that they've had 5 to 7 nights in the 50s, what should they do? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We leave a little bit of a mess out here that's kind of not necessarily all that visible. Everything is planted so tight in here that you wouldn't know that up underneath the plants is a lot of the pruned material that we've taken off the plants. We chop and drop things. So when we cut something back, I'll take a handful of it and throw it under another shrub that's next to it. So I leave the place a little bit messy without it being so necessarily visually messy. So keep that in mind. We need messy spaces in our gardens. We need a stack of wood someplace. We need a stack of limbs, in a corner someplace that isn't visible. These are the places where a lot of insects, a lot of beetles need material that's breaking down. A lot of our flying insects, moths and other things, they all have different strategies. And we have turned our gardens into edge to edge to edge perfection, in our minds. And that all that detail we've done has really taken away opportunity from a lot of insects to be in our gardens. And so that's the main reason I wrote that down. I really don't know what to tell you on the exact day to cut all that stuff back and all that kind of thing. But the more people that will leave a little pile of cut up material somewhere in a corner, the better. We'll all be better off for it. Having some place where these insects have an opportunity to hide, basically, in our gardens. Let's see. What kind of plants, shrubs, trees would you like to grow if you had space? So Steph on her list is pawpaw is on her list, and we'll probably plant one down at the garden. Passion fruit, kiwi. There's some of the edible things that we might put in here, and then there's some larger conifers that I would probably grow. We have a big conifer collector. T-shirts available on the website. Wasn't going to advertise that, but now that I'm saying conifers, we have a very large conifer collection in this garden. But they're all little ones. 90% of them are all little dwarf conifers. I'd probably have larger growing conifers if we were on more space, because we do love conifers. But in this garden, we have to have ones that we can kind of control, 2 by 2 and that kind of thing, or super upright and narrow. Let's see. Somebody has an October Glory maple, 10 to 15 feet tall. It's got 2 dead leaders. They planted it 2 years ago. Should they prune them out? Yeah, if they're dead, you definitely go ahead and cut them out. There's a lot of tree damage from this past November, December. There were a lot of trees that weren't fully asleep. We had a big limb on the Golden Falls Redbud back here that had a big crack in it. I was in a consultation the other day and somebody else's was cracked down at the bottom. Luckily, this one wasn't cracked down at the bottom because their whole tree was dead. And I'm seeing it in a bunch of places where there's a lot of dead limbs on things. The trees hadn't pulled the moisture down into the roots. And then we had a deep freeze that froze that water inside the branch and cracked them open. Just a lot of cracking in trees. Another consultation this week with a dead tree that was cracked basically down one entire side. So that may have been what happened. I don't know. Of course, October Glory red maples, they're not necessary. I don't know how big your lot is, but they can be, there's not an attractive one in this neighborhood. There are a lot of maples planted in this neighborhood, but we would be hard pressed to find one that was older than 5 or 6 years old that you would be impressed with in this neighborhood, despite it probably being the #1 shade tree planted in subdivisions, at least here in Raleigh and Charlotte and other places I go. I call it 7 shrubs in a cloud of dust. The landscaping that people do for new houses, they have like a minimum of 7 shrubs across the foundation, usually things that get 20 feet tall are gonna block the windows because they were inexpensive. And then 1 tree, and it's almost always one of these selected maple varieties like October Glory or Red Sunset or one of those. And then they'll sod the front and seed the back. And I call it 7 shrubs in a cloud of dust, that kind of landscaping. But I rarely ever, if you go back 5, 6, 8 years later and look at those maples, hardly any of them look good growing in the lawn out in the front of a small suburban lot. I had somebody ask about how to learn more about hardscaping in the landscape. I don't know if they're a landscaper or just trying to do some projects on their own. There's a lot of YouTube videos for, hardscaping out there. The vast majority of hardscaping now is done with concrete materials, dyed concrete walkways and, retaining walls and kind of engineered products. I've been self-employed since 1994 and I've never done a job with any of those materials, not one. And I was 90% of the landscape jobs I ever did, I had hardscape on them. But I've always used natural stone and brick and wood materials, kind of combined together, just natural materials. Because it's just what I like to do. And there was a lot of jobs out there in the world for it because it was a very limited number of people that knew how to do it. And so, these patio type things, sidewalk type things are definitely part knowledge, about how to, I poured a concrete footer around this patio and then mortared brick in and, then combine this stone and this brick into this patio to create it. And it's not settling because I knew how to construct it. And then also, but it's part art as well. So that was, there's got to be a little bit of art, involved in it, in the vision of what you want it to look like before you start. Again, there's videos on the internet. Working with natural materials is more about jumping in and just doing it, and making, if something doesn't turn out exactly the way you want it, you can always pick it up and put it back down again. But I think it's more of a jump in and do it kind of a thing. And then, part of so much of landscape design or construction is trying to kind of, we have a human tendency to make everything squares and rectangles, you know, and boxes. And it's really, you know, trying to break away from that and trying to have free form patios and beds and pathways and walkways and those kinds of things that are more natural looking to the eye, to have long linear curves and things. So this, you know, this patio is a, you know, kind of an ovalish circle, not a perfect circle, you know, but anyway, it's kind of hard to, I didn't put up a video about the patio construction just because I know how the internet is with any kind of construction based videos. It's just, you know, it'll be 700 comments about how I should have done it differently. And I just, you know, I got paid to do this for a long time. You know, that was not the feedback that I was looking for in my life. Let's see. So somebody has asked this question a few times, and it was just, so I wrote it down, and I don't know how helpful I can be, but they have this tan gray clay, which I've worked in before, but there's a section over in Durham at Research Triangle Park that has a lot of this gray clay exposed, and it's really sticky. We had a job at a shooting range putting in, it was an area that got wet that people walked in, so we were putting in a gravel sidewalk basically, and the bobcat wouldn't push through. You couldn't dig in this stuff. The bobcat would just spin on this gray clay. Really tough stuff to work with. And they're like, how, you know, asking me how to fix it. I think it's the exact same strategy I've used everywhere else. I would bury it in wood chips and allow the processes to work the exact same with earthworms and other things carrying this material down in there. You know, it's the materials, you can grow plants in it. It's got all the nutrients and everything you want in it. I understand that it's much harder to dig in and harder, and it's just really slick. It's hard to, it's just hard to do anything in it. But I don't care what type of soil you have, I would go with the same strategy that we talked about here, which is improving the soil from the top down. I wouldn't want to start trying to till anything into that. But my strategy of just laying things on the top and not tilling has improved this soil wildly. And this was red clay, but it's even hard to find now. The worms and everything has done such a good job. But exact same strategy. I don't care what type of soil you have, bury it in wood chips for some period of time, you know, and you know, it's kind of a miracle what happens underneath that. Let's see, as long as you're in an area that gets some rainfall. Let's see. Okay, so somebody had a Natchez crepe myrtle and it was planted too deep originally, and they've gone in and they've pulled the soil out away from it, and so basically created a bowl in order to expose the root flare on that Natchez crepe myrtle. Should they raise it up higher? I would if you can. I don't know how, oh, it was only planted 2 years ago, so it shouldn't be too bad digging it up and popping it and raising it up. If it was planted 8 years ago, crepe myrtles can anchor themselves really, really well, and it may have been much harder. But if 2 years is probably not going to be the hardest job you've ever done. Your one issue now is it's all leafed out and everything, and so when you start messing with it right now, you have the potential definitely to have some wilting going on with all that new growth. All these plants have so much new growth on them. If you start digging them out of the ground now, it's going to lose that new growth. So you may have to prune it some. I would, you know, prune it just a little bit to stop just the terminal growth on the end. Like this Weigela is just covered in new growth. I mean, there's no way it could support that new growth and me damage the roots. So if I just take that new growth off of it, and I could pop this out of the ground and move it with some confidence. But yeah, I would raise it up. Let's see, somebody, let's see. This person's on a small lot. How close do plants like viburnums need to be to each other to pollinate? So if you have plants that need a male, female plant in order to pollinate one another, how close do they need to be? They can be pretty far apart. I mean, bees move around, and other pollinators move around quite a bit. So if they're on the same lot and you're on a fairly small lot, anywhere, doesn't matter. The bees will find it. Obviously, if they're slightly closer together, you know, that will have some impact. The main thing for pollination, and this is true with everything, goes back to that first question I had about why is it important to have for the garden to be diverse. Here's the other thing. We have hundreds of reasons for pollinators to be in this garden because there's something always flowering. When you have a situation where you're trying to get things cross-pollinated, you're trying to get a vegetable garden pollinated, you're trying to get, certain things you want to happen in the garden, the more diverse the garden is, the more reasons you have for those pollinators to be in your garden. So we have a vegetable garden over there, but we also, behind the vegetable garden, have a wall of dahlias that come up. We have butterfly bushes in front of it. We have all kinds of other flowering things over there all the way around it. We have a perennial border back there. So I'm not asking a bee to come to the garden and pollinate. Well, tomatoes are kind of self-pollinating, so maybe not a great example, but I'm not asking a bee to come and pollinate my peppers over there and not giving them anything else. They can just live here. And so that's one of the other strategies to make sure that things get pollinated, to make sure your hollies get pollinated, and make sure viburnums get pollinated, is to have lots of reasons for these pollinators to be in your garden. Okay. So in my 50 conifer video, we included no yews. And it said, this person said too often forgotten. We only have one yew in this garden. We're kind of on the southern range. I say this, but there are yews that are actually native to the southeast. So it's not like we don't have any yews available, but most of the yews are in the northern part of the country more than the southern part of the country. We tend to use Cephalotaxis or false plum yews down here. We do have Taxus baccata in the front garden out there, a variegated Taxus baccata. So we do have one yew, and I probably should have included that in the video. But it wasn't necessarily it just happened to be that I had 50 different conifers that I had filmed recently, and I put them into a video. It wasn't a slight on any conifer that wasn't in the video. It was more of a, here's the 50 I've got filmed. And at some point it'll be 100, instead of 50. And certainly some yews would be in it by that point, but it wasn't a slight on yews. It was just, those are the things I had filmed, and we live here. So very few of the nurseries actually sell yews, actual yews. Have we noticed a drop in pollinators? No, not at all. It's weird. It's a weird cycle because late February, early March, you see lots of bumblebees out. And I think they're doing their little mating dance, floating around in the air all over the place. And then they kind of disappear for a few weeks always. And then once the native pollinator plants start popping open, and the salvias that are not native, start popping open, they are everywhere. And we have, if you come here June 20th, you will see a lot of bees. And I mean, truly a lot of bees, especially the morning group on Saturday. Well, all the groups actually will overlap. It's usually early in the morning and late in the evening when their most pollinators are out here. But we do have ebbs and flows in it, and I think that's just natural. You have very early flowering perennials, and then you have kind of a gap in here where there's not as many blooming, and then full on, once the bee balm and all of those things are going, there'll be bees out here everywhere. But it does come and go. But again, back to that last question, plant as many things as you can into the space, and you'll have a reason for them to be there all the time. Let's see. Do containers need to be kept cool during the heat of the summer, and how to do that? Depends on what the plant is in the container, really. I mean, that Lamandra I have back there is I think it's a South African native, or maybe it's Australian native. And it's in a light colored pot. It doesn't need to be. It'll be totally fine in that container without me thinking about it. If I had an azalea in one of these containers, I've got a Japanese maple in a container over here. It probably would not like its roots extremely hot during the summertime. So really, I just need to have the container in an area where the sun is being shaded by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that that soil's not heating up as much. We would always have, so we grow in black pots, mostly black pots in the nursery. Those black pots heat up early in the season and get the plants growing a little earlier. So there's a little advantage in having that black container. But in the summertime, on the on the edge where the sun's hitting the pots most of the day, we won't get any roots on one side of the container. You know, it'll just burn them off on one side of the container. So there's definitely a period of time, it's plant to plant specific. And there is a period of time where even if you just simply go out and rotate your container about a third of a turn sometime during the summertime, that may help them distribute the roots in the container just a little bit. But if you see the plants are wilting, but there's still moisture in the soil, usually that's a pretty good indicator that the plant is its roots are somehow being damaged by the heat that's down in the container. So that would definitely be an indicator that the container needs to go in slightly more shade. Somebody asked about shovels, and they were asking which is best for planting and root pruning. There is the root slayer shovels that have little teeth on the end are really good for breaking roots. If you are trying to root prune things or transplant things, it may be a shovel that would be helpful to you. I only use one shovel, and it's this trenching shovel right here. Everybody's seen the other one for years. It's about 2/3 of the length of this one that I've had forever. This tool has lasted a long time. Somebody actually found it on Amazon. I have not been able to relocate that shovel for years, but I bought one last year. The Structron, this is the best shovel I've ever owned by far. It has this perfect angle somehow, that angle right there, where when you stick it down in the ground, it just curves right up under the plant. Really good. Mine, it's got this little point on the top here, and that thing can bounce off of roots. So if you're trying to cut roots, it's not necessarily the best. Mine has worn down over time. The other one's worn down and it's actually inverted now, like that. And it's great at cutting roots. So it's a shovel that was not early on good at cutting roots, but now it's great at cutting roots. So that's the shovel that I use. And I have we have a lot of garden tools. Heck, we have 5 different carts. But I probably only use 5 tools total in the garden, and this one more than any other. And then that little low cart you guys see us using. And then not much else. I mean, there's very few tools. I'll use a garden rake because there's a lot of different things. I'll use that, the little weed shuffle hoe to get weeds. And there's just not many tools that are actually used, despite the fact that I've got a lot of tools. Just haven't found ones for me, a lot of times I just knowing me, instead of going, I could go over there and I could get a better tool for this particular job. I'm more of a person who goes, I'm just gonna do it. And I do it really quickly and I'm done with it. Let's see. This person is in zone 9B in California. They have a 2-year-old flamethrower red bud. It hasn't really leafed out or bloomed at this point. Can they help it leaf out? I'm wondering if you just didn't have enough winter, you didn't have enough chill hours. It's weird here in the East that these are the best peonies I've ever had. These alliums are just unbelievable, right? I mean, they're just so good this year. A lot of the perennials have come out of the ground like gangbusters. It's always so funny on this channel. I get people in way northern areas of the country kind of jealous of our gardens being so far ahead in the south. But because of the chill hours you get in the north, when your garden does start growing, it actually grows faster than our gardens, because that winter rest actually goes a long way to invigorating the plant. And so we have a lot of things blooming in this garden better, and the perennials are ahead of where they normally are. I can just tell that they actually got proper rest this winter. And I'm wondering if you just didn't, in 9B in California, get enough cold on that thing through the winter time. You know, that could be an issue, but these plants do need to rest during the winter time. Let's see. This person only has leaves on the ends of their smoke bush branches, so I guess it's just sticks and then a few leaves right at the very, very top. Can they reset prune it to get full leaf growth? You can reset prune it. It'll cost you the blooms this year, although they're probably blooming right about now. we pruned ours, and I don't know if you guys remember it. I will take a plant like this Weigela, and I will say, okay, I'm gonna give you one opportunity, and I'll cut the thing basically to the ground, 8 inches tall, whatever. And I'll let it come back out. If it doesn't make me happy at that point, or it's not clearly the right plant for that spot at that point, it comes out. And that's what we did with our smoke bush. So definitely, if it's not doing what you want it to do, reset, prune it first, see how it comes out from that. My guess is it'll still be stretched or look weird. At that point, you can take it out if it's still not doing what you wanted it to do. Number 21, if you plant densely, do you risk damaging other plants if you opt to transplant them somewhere else? Yes, but I don't think about it. If I need to, I actually got to cut this Weigela back. I don't think you can see down here, there's a variegated gardenia down there. If I decided I didn't want to cut the Weigela back and I just want to move that gardenia, it's so close to that David viburnum and this Weigela. Certainly I'm cutting roots on either one of them. I just don't worry about it. It just can't, I don't stress about those things. I pop things out of the ground and I move them somewhere else. That other plant will recover from that little bit of damage that I did to it without any problem. It should anyway, as long as, I mean, unless you do it on a 100-degree day in the middle of summer and, you know, in the afternoon, you know, there are probably ways you could, in fact, harm the other plants around them. Do it on a day that makes sense, or in the evening or something like that. Let's see. So a question from one of Ram's videos, Ram and Tom Giberson's garden from this past week. What will hard pruning do? So I just talked about hard pruning some of the shrubs that were in that garden. Basically, in the past, a lot of the things that were planted there, she tree formed them. And then she came in and she put other shrubs underneath. And some of those have been tree formed, and then other things put kind of underneath them. So there's this beautiful layering in that garden that you guys can see. But some of the shrubs don't make sense to tree form. And so it is shady enough in there that camellias might look okay as tree forms, but more typically look better as kind of shrubby things where they're leafed kind of lower to the ground. So things like camellias and azaleas and boxwoods and other, pittosporum and other abelia and other shrubs that tend to look a little better if they're kind of mounded to the ground. They're not good candidates for limbing up into trees. Those shrubs, once they start to kind of stretch and lose foliage down at the bottom, they just are not they're not as attractive as they could be, or they don't look as good as they could be. So at some point, if you're growing things in a little more shade than they want, they'll try to stretch on you. And then you say, okay, is it a good candidate? Like this Chinese snowball viburnum is a great candidate for turning into a tree. This Clayera sitting next to it, which is stretched a little bit, is not a great candidate to turn into a tree. It just doesn't look good like that. So this one I'll prune a little bit to keep it full down to the ground. This one I'm going to limb up into a tree. So there's some plants that look good like that and some that don't. So what we're saying over at Ram's is at some point it's probably best to take your azaleas and just take them down to 2 feet in height, and then give yourself 5 or 6 years where they can look good again and not be constantly turned into little meatballs. They can still kind of have a loose, open form. And once they reach that point again where they're stretched, you can reset prune them again. So that's what I'm kind of talking about in her garden. Is there were some plants, and this is a couple years ago, we started having this conversation about, some of the plants in there just needed to come down and be reset. And she's done that, and a lot of them look absolutely fantastic now. So an area gets sun from 2 to 5 in the afternoon, hot sun in Tennessee. So they focus on sun or shade plants, definitely sun plants. If the full sun is on something during the time that you would definitely need to have sunscreen on, from 10 in the morning until like 4 in the afternoon, if it's 3 or 4 hours of that period of time, you're going to want to have more sun, or at least part sun and part sun plants in that area. Somebody said they hear agapanthus bloom best when they're root bound. That tends to be true, especially in containers, and they get root bound in a hurry. Should they put them in the ground still in the container? No, I would just plan on the fact that it's going to take a couple seasons for it to really root in really well, to perform well in the garden. We have agapanthus coming up all over the place. Despite the fact that we had a cold winter, all of our agapanthus are back, and they've been in the ground long enough now that they can really perform quite well. So they basically become root bound in their own space, but it takes a little while longer that way. But I wouldn't do it in a container. Otherwise, you're just going to have maintenance in the future. So somebody has a Texas red bud that they need to fatten up. Should they tip prune it? Yeah, just you can go right around any of these plants and just take an inch off the end of a branch here, and that will force new growth down in the center of it. Don't do these things to plants that aren't in good shape, or they're stressed, or they're going through some weird thing. You know, leave those kind of plants alone to recover on their own. But if it's a vigorous plant, it's in good shape, yeah, you can tip prune it to increase some branching down in the plant just a little bit. Somebody said, why use expanded shell over perlite? So you can use either when you're planting things in the containers or in the ground that you're trying to get drainage. I just always think that that expanded shell cannot be compacted or compressed in any way. And so it's going to last forever. It's forever drainage. And that's the main reason that I use it over perlite. Plus, perlite makes me cough. It's dusty in those bags, and I used a lot of perlite over the years doing my propagation at the nursery, and we mixed perlite in with bark or whatever to for our propagation. I mean, you have to wear a mask, you know, with it. You should wear a mask with it. If you don't wear a mask with it, you should. It's really dusty, especially if you're in any kind of indoor space like a greenhouse or something like that, opening bags of perlite. So, you know, that's another reason I just don't like to be around it anymore. Concrete's another thing. And, you know, talking about doing these hardscape projects, mortar and concrete, you know, when you open those bags and that dust is in the air, you know, I breathed that stuff enough in this life. So that's another reason. Let's see. This person says, should they yearly remove their pine straw to apply compost and then replace the pine straw since it breaks down slowly? I would probably never yearly want to do that. If you wanted to do it once and you thought you would gain something by having a bit of a humus layer between that pine straw and the ground, because that pine straw just takes forever to build topsoil. It just takes forever. Then if you did this, I would do it well. That would be my point. If you remove that pine straw and put down compost, I'd go ahead and put down 1.5 inches of compost so you're just not doing this again for a while. It's not something I'd want to do every year, because I also don't want to uncover the soil so much, because every time you uncover it, you're probably killing things that are in the soil. So, but to get to the starting line of having that humus layer that's likely missing. This is one thing. When they come in and do construction on your lot, you know, they took the topsoil, the humus layer that's between the topsoil, and, you know, you have this leaf litter or whatever that was there before, and then you have this kind of humus layer, this in-between layer where organic material is almost broken down, and then you have this kind of topsoil layer, and then the subsoil. A lot of times in a new house you're moving into, you're just down to the subsoil. So we're trying to rebuild all those things, and pine straw just won't rebuild all those things. It's not that I'm saying it's a bad mulch, it's just not good at building topsoil. It takes centuries instead of, you know, instead of decades to build a lot of topsoil. So, you know, if you want to pull it back and rebuild that layer underneath, and then, you know, then put it back on top. But I wouldn't do it every year, because again, at some point when you do build life in that soil, every time you disturb it, you're going to be killing it, potentially, especially on like a hot sunny day or something like that. So there you go. There were 26 great questions. Thank you guys for participating in these videos. The weekly garden planner is $50 off for the month of May. Thank you to those who have bought it, and thank you to those who are considering it. It's over on the website. I did the address and everything for the house earlier. Let me know if you have any other questions down below on the open garden, and ask questions in the comment section down below, and we'll pick from those next week. Thanks for watching.